Hello there. I would love for you to imagine for a second, with me, that you're a marksman in a competition. If your scope is made poorly or damaged, your shots unfortunately will neither be accurate nor precise. On the other hand, if you have a wonderfully tuned and well-crafted scope to guide your eyes and hands consistently and true to the target, then you will achieve your goal of a tight grouping in the center of the bullseye. In this same way, the jig for your kumiko is there to guide you to your target of kumiko strips that are consistent and accurate in length and angle. Just as the quality of a marksman's scope influences the quality of their shot, the quality of your jig determines how well it can do its job of guiding you to consistently precise wooden strips. The high-achieving marksman does not enter a competition with an untrustworthy scope, and you should not make kumiko with an untrustworthy jig. This brings me to the first of 7 things that I learned while making kumiko. Your jig's quality sets the tone for the quality of your entire project, and quality is not something you should skimp on. If you're doing what I was doing before I made kumiko, you've probably already watched the popular videos on it. I also did my time in YouTube University, and I don't want to waste your time. So for this one, we're only going to talk about the things that weren't mentioned in all the other videos I found when I was learning the process of making kumiko. These may not be the most flashy or entertaining tips, but I promise they're worth your time to learn if you actually intend to make kumiko. If someone would have told them to me before I started, then I would have saved hours of wasted time and frustration, given that I listened. My jigs have a few features that I would make differently if I did this over again. The standout amongst them is that I would match the grooves on the top of the jigs to the size of my stock as well as I possibly could. Doing this would cut down a ton on the slop in my cuts, and it would save you a hell of a lot of annoyance in using a makeshift tensioning stick to lever the strip into place each time you cut it, or mashing it down with your fingertip. Better fit-ups will result from this with less effort needed to make them. A massive time saver is to make each stop block independent of each other. And this is obvious in retrospect, but in case you don't plan to do this, you will be wasting oodles upon oodles of time. You have to be able to set each angle's stop block and keep it set if you want to have any semblance of a consistent workflow. I approximately tripled the speed that I was finishing pieces at just by changing my one stop block on the 2-angle jig to be independent per angle. And I'm honestly embarrassed I did it with one stop block for so long. If you're a marksman who has never practiced or even been to a range before, it's likely you're still gonna suck even with the nice scope. For the first time, at least. Technique matters, and with making kumiko, there were 3 things that I was doing wrong with my technique, but I only noticed they were wrong after it was too late and they had cost me precious time. So don't do these. When I noticed a cut wasn't going perfectly, for a while I would change the angle of the chisel where I could, and this would correct the misalignment on a piece-by-piece basis. It would work for a bit, and then things would just start looking wrong, and I didn't know why. I was compensating for my stop block not being set properly, and while I thought I was just saving time and correcting errors as they came by fixing little inconsistencies here and there, what this really did was it allowed me to ignore the jig's inaccuracy in how I had set it. Another unfortunate byproduct of working this way was that you can unknowingly dig the blade of your chisel actually into the face of the jig. These little gouges that you make add up, and they can skew the angle of your cut by multiple degrees over time. The jig sets the tone and determines the quality of your project. You should set the jig perfectly, then follow its lead. Don't get impatient or cut corners, even if you can convince yourself that it's not going to hurt the project. This next one could be part of number 4, but it feels a little separate. If I were you, I would make it a hard rule to make no adjustments to the cut using the chisel. No different angles, no different technique, anything like that. This is the second thing that I should have adhered to that I didn't. Think of the chisel as a mechanically actuated blade that will come down the same each time and every time. Your tool to determine the way your wood is cut is not the chisel, but actually the adjustment of your stop block in the jig. Relying on the jig, not the chisel, like this will let you make more accurate cuts much more efficiently, and with structurally integrated consistency instead of just relying on your own hand movement for consistency. There is one notable exception to this self-imposed rule though, and that is when you're at the end of a cut, especially on the shallow angles, and practically a requirement if you're taking off a lot of material with the cut, I found it very useful to change the motion of my chisel from a perpendicular push to a more sweeping and slicing downward motion there at the end. When I was cutting pieces initially, I would just push straight across and would end up pushing the fibers of the wood apart at the end of the cut where they had no support, instead of slicing through them like you're supposed to do. Now, the sharpness of your chisel could solve this problem if you had an extremely sharp chisel. However, changing my form on this did a lot to help minimize the tear out I was experiencing on some pieces without having to resharpen the chisel constantly. And this saved tons of time making new pieces or refining pieces that I had minimally torn out after. Now, this last tip will help you avoid frustration, mostly in the beginning of the project before you get into a groove of things. The inner angled pieces on your kumiko panel should look and feel as if they won't fit at first. I wasted time, multiple times, finishing a piece only to be frustrated that it seemed like it wouldn't fit. I would then shave it down a little more in the jig, thus propagating my frustration as I would find it's now too loose and I had to make an entirely new one. When the piece is the correct size, it will not fit unless it is entering at a perfect 90 degrees perpendicular to the face of the lattice. If you can put it in at an angle, then it is too loose. If you have to spend a few moments positioning it straight up and down, then applying firm pressure to coax it into sliding home, then you've done it right. My panels can be shaken vigorously and they stay together, and there is no glue or fasteners of any kind in any of the meeting points of the different pieces. There is a card at the upper right-hand corner of this video if you would like to see how it went when I tried making kumiko for the first time. Thank you for watching this far. As a thanks, I would like to give you a secret peek into the future of my work here. For months now, I have been obsessing feverishly over the material science of fabricating porous ceramics and their relationship with biophilic living art. Maybe it's a passion, maybe it's an obsession, but it's all I can think about lately. This is an idea born nearly a decade ago from my love of art made with living nature, and it's getting to the point where I can finally take the steps needed to bring this idea into the world. The aesthetic and functional design, the artistry and the care of creation, the material science, the fabrication, and the visual chemistry of a mostly ceramic, moss-encrusted, practically self-sustaining, living and breathing sculptural piece is the future of what you can expect to see from me after I've put the finishing touches on my current terrarium project. I cannot wait to share the overflowing of ideas I have about it with you. Eventually, I would love for the finished works to be something that you would be able to have in your own home. If you're interested in personal updates from me on that project, I have a newsletter that you can sign up for where I'll be sharing occasional behind-the-scenes looks into it. It's the second link in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I dearly appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.